Okay, you guys ready? This is my very first time ever working a puppet. Ready?
Go for it, Darren.
It's my solemn duty to tell people how cool Canadian shows can be, highlighting the stuff I don't see being talked about enough. I didn't come onto YouTube with that as my MO, but the rest of yous had your chance. I'm running this monkey farm now, Frankenstein! Today we're checking out a show called Freaky Stories from the wild mind of Steve Schnier, an animated anthology covering urban legends, campfire stories, tales of all kinds, and they're 100% true. Just ask the friend of a friend it happened to. Coming to you live from Ted's Diner, your hosts are a roach named Larry DeBug and his sidekick Maurice the Maggot, two animatronic puppets. Really, Freaky's a live-action cartoon hybrid, and it was a cornerstone of YTV's image back in the day. During Halloween 2022, I gave it a proper watch after not seeing it in forever, and pretty soon I had to make a video on it. The plan was to have it done for Halloween 2023, but that came and went and I didn't want to wait another year. And I don't always try to make the definitive video on something, but I will if I can. This'll have darn near everything you'd ever want to know about this show. But first, I gotta give a shout out to the Mr. TV podcast, a big reason I made this video to begin with. They interviewed Steve and he went into insane detail on Freaky, but guess what? I had the honor of speaking with him too. I reached out on a whim and he was more than eager to talk about it, and you'll be hearing from him throughout the video. So where's a show like this even come from? Well, the idea was in Steve's head a good 10 years before it hit the air, going back to the late 80s. He started out simple and inexpensive, a show about short stories which led to fairy tales, and so he researched fairy tales from all over the world. That's when he realized all the good ones were incredibly violent and toning them down for TV would suck the life out of them. He wondered if there were any modern fairy tales and thought, yeah, urban legends. Instead of once upon a time, stories would start with, this is a true story. It happened to a friend of mine. Making a proof of concept with The Hook Man, he pitched it to CTV and CBC before striking a deal with YTV in 1991. But it took a few years for that deal to bear fruit. Around late 1994, YTV gave Steve 90 days to find the show an executive producer, or it was curtains. He heard of a guy called John Delmage who got things done around there, but he was always super busy. Day 90 came and no luck. He wrote a thank you letter to YTV for their support, and as he was packing his stuff, Delmage rang him up and said, "Hey Steve, we're good to go." God bless him. A lot of other folks came together to make this happen, and it certainly wasn't cheap. Season 1 had a budget of $350,000 per episode. Most of it went to the animation crew in Korea and to Funbag Studios in Ottawa for storyboards, layouts, and design. Steve originally wanted to assign stories to artists nationwide, like a commercial National Film Board of Canada. While that didn't pan out for the art, it did for some other parts of the show. The doors were open for any and all writers, whether it was their first industry job or they were halfway across the country. And the show used around 30 to 40 different composers. Little trivia about Freaky's production companies: Decode Entertainment got its name from chunks of its founders' names, Steve Deneur, Neil Court, and John Delmage. And Steve's studio, Vujade, is Deja Vu Sideways, quote, "the feeling that you haven't seen this before." Well played! When talking do's and don'ts for the show, there was a golden rule set by YTV executive Merv Stone. He told Steve, "You can do whatever you want, but I have to be able to show it to families during the dinner hour." The rest, as they say, is history, and did they ever get away with a lot. There's references to drinking and smoking, one story centers on a college dorm panty raid, and a shocking amount of stories focus on dead pets. I make it sound worse than it really is, but it still surprised me. Old recordings showed it aired with a G rating, but there's one instance it got away with a C. I'm gonna guess that was a mistake. Back when the show came out, Steve said there was nothing in it he wouldn't want his 3-year-old to see. That's pretty hardcore. I wasn't ready for the bug in the ear story. I mean, the premise alone is bad enough, but when they're getting it out of the guy's ear, there's a blink and you'll miss it shot of blood. I totally missed that on my first watch. Ugh. The only story they got flack for was Diet Pill, where the supermodel deals with her weight issues. An angry mother demanded to speak to the guy in charge, to which Steve explained the context behind the story and assured her it wouldn't happen again. and he never heard back from her. At one point, the model stands on a scale, but the number is suspiciously blurred out. I wonder if the TV airings were any different. Maybe someone has a recording they can check out. As for my own history with Freaky, I didn't watch it much as a kid, but I was still familiar with it. I saw a story here and there, and I think everyone knows the "this is a true story" tagline, whether you've seen it or not. It ran for 3 seasons from '97 to 2000, but YTV had regular reruns till 2005, and still played stories in between shows for some time after. Old schedule logs show the last one aired in 2007 at 3 in the morning, so it hung on for a whole decade, plus the entirety of the Keep It Weird era. I remember stories playing after the 3 hairy thumbs up block. When a movie ran short, Freaky was the perfect filler. I watched one of them after seeing Kangaroo Jack, and Freaky was definitely the highlight of that evening. The show had great promos too. One had the YTV voice guy saying he pitched 10 stories to Larry and Maurice, and he's mad because they all got rejected. And the 15-second version? It's a follow-up where he's still mad, but you know, he got to narrate a story in season 3, so I don't know what he's on about. One thing from Freaky I never forgot was the theme song, an instrumental with great spooky vibes and an awesome guitar. I still head bob to it without even thinking. Steve's intent with Freaky was to be rebellious and push the limits of what YTV allowed, and that extended to the original intro. There's a song by Beck called Devil's Haircut, and at the end of it he's just screaming, "Devil's haircut in my mind!" Steve wanted that for the intro, just having them scream "Freaky stories!" But as he put it, wiser minds prevailed. And yeah, I wouldn't trade what we have for anything. Before delving further into the show, we gotta talk about its pilot. This debuted on YTV's Dark Knight Marathon, a 90s Halloween tradition, with this kicking off Dark Knight 3 in '95. YTV promoted the heck out of it, though in the years since it was just a faint memory for most. That is, until 2021 when it resurfaced on YouTube, a rerun from Dark Knight 4 uploaded by one Greg the Ghost. The quality's what you'd expect, but it adds a bit of mystique to it, almost like a found footage movie, cause I guess it really is found footage. My friend Microphone saw this the night it premiered and never thought he'd see it again. This is also where we see the original Larry puppet. Well, actually, there's a Larry that predates this one, and here he is, never been seen by the general public till now. In the show, Larry's performed by James Rankin, but here he's manned by Gord Robertson. His body of work includes Fraggle Rock and Sesame Street, but he's also my main man Zaboomafoo, and now I can't unhear it.
I've been to the forest and I've been to the desert, but I've never been to Wrong. Where's Wrong? Finally got the zookeep's attention. Scurried right up his leg and into his underwear.
Rankin was going to do the pilot, but long story short, they built him too small. No one could fit their hands inside to maneuver him. Robertson was the one guy who could squeeze 2 fingers in there, like literally 2 fingers, and that was $15,000 down the toilet. Still, that puppet's hanging in there. All things considered, he's looking pretty alright. Instead of a diner, Larry's in a zoo telling stories he's heard through the grapevine. Steve felt the pilot was the closest Freaky got to showcasing the talents of independent artists. The stories here are more like really expensive animatics and reminds me of when they'd put kids' books on tape and they'd have a narrator talking over the illustrations. I can't be the only one who remembers those, right? I've got no issue with the show's conventional animation, but the pilot really is striking. The spiders in the hairdo story was all done in pencil crayon by Glenn Hansen, who no doubt worked his hands to the bone. And look at this art for the segment Princess by Carl Wines. It really does speak for itself, my goodness man. The Sewer Gators artwork, done by Scott Cooper and Maureen Paxton, has a really cool 3D feel to it, like I could reach out and just touch the artwork, you know? One shot from the dog from Mexico, which Steve did, was used in the show's intro. The old man with his glasses reflecting electricity. No wonder that shot always stood out to me. All 4 stories here were repurposed for the show, and it's cool seeing how they differ from each other. With that out of the way, I want to talk more about these puppets cause I love them so much. Here's the Larry we all know, such a cool design, and those big anime eyes immediately grab your attention. Fun fact, he's heavily inspired by animation director Larry Jacobs. He and Steve met on Magic School Bus and have been the best of friends ever since. Another friend and colleague, Ted Bastine, did the first drawing of Larry Debug, then Steve said, hey, make him look more like Larry J, and he came up with this. Everyone thought it looked just like him, except for Larry. Larry also boarded a few stories, like the very first one in the series, and even gets name dropped in another. He also made the show Birds, if anyone remembers that. Freaky's pilot was a solo affair with Larry just talking to the audience, but he needed someone to play off of. And so Maurice was born, performed by Dan Redican. He's based on a boss of Steve's he didn't like when he worked at Nelvana, so they made him a maggot and added some alliteration. The legal team knew exactly who that guy was, but Maurice didn't have his name, personality, or goatee, so it was a-okay. The philosophy behind him is that he's unaware of his lack of eyes, arms, legs, etc. But he enjoys life and making people smile all the same.
You know what's worse than raining cats and dogs? Hailing a taxi!
Thank you!
I just want to give him a big old hug, and that's big coming from me because I hate maggots. Just mentioning one makes me want to puke, but Maurice is kind of adorable. My mom thought he was gross though, especially with all his slime. Steve said women really didn't like him, but they just don't know him very well. With puppets like these, the ravages of time eventually turn them to dust, and I thought Larry and Maurice met that fate a long time ago. But Steve's kept them in the best condition you could hope for. They're frozen in place and can't be used at all, but seeing them again warmed my heart. It was like reuniting with old friends. I mean, look at that face. There's a genuine soul behind that. I love seeing these guys in their element. They're like an old-fashioned comedy duo, right up there with your Abbott and Costellos and your Keenan and Kells.
Last week I told you to drink a glass of orange juice after a hot bath.
Yeah, well, I'm still not finished drinking the hot bath.
Look me in the face.
I got my own troubles.
You don't get me.
I don't want you!
How do you sleep?
Like this!
Their antics are my favorite parts of the show, and the diner setting is a big part of that. It was made up of 3 sets, the exterior, which was 1/18th scale, then the puppet set where everything was, quote, 18 times bigger than life, based on the ratio of a real cockroach and maggot and what'd work for the puppeteers. Finally, there's the live action set, only used in season 1. The summer before Freaky aired, Steve and his wife went on a diner research tour across the states, and found their answer in Castleton, Vermont with the Bird's Eye Diner, which is still around today. Steve took a bunch of photos and brought them back to Ted Bastine, who designed all the sets and made a near replica of Bird's Eye. That's why it's called Ted's Diner in the show, and those 2 chefs in the background? Ted and Steve, respectively. I read a YouTube comment from someone who thought they were Larry and Maurice before they got turned into bugs for whatever reason, but I'm not knocking that. It's a cool headcanon. Season 2 also had a picture of a little girl on the wall, and the story behind that involves Pop-Tarts of all things. In '98, Pop-Tarts did a promotion with the show, fully aware a cockroach and maggot would be selling their product, and a few things came out of that. There was this cool t-shirt, which Miker won for himself, and Steve still has a couple laying around, but the grand prize was getting to be on Freaky Stories. However, the diner set was gone, and with the lead time for animation, they couldn't get her into one of the stories. Someone got the idea of using a school photo of her and placing it in the diner. She and her family also got to fly down and meet the crew, take pictures on the puppet set. Wherever she is now, I hope she still has fond memories of this. Speaking of cool promotions, Freaky also appeared at the Art Gallery of Ontario in March of '98. A great behind-the-scenes look into things, and they even set an attendance record. This was hosted by Darren Jones, who did stuff in The Zone and MTV Canada, among other things, but here's a freaky story of my own. My mom was interviewed by Darren when he was on the Rick Mercer Report. The episode in question aired March 7th, 2005. They did a feature on her workplace, it was a bartending school, and at the end, my mom threw him out on his ear and into the snow. It really is a small world, but I'm glad there's footage of the AGO stuff, that's really cool. Going back to season 1, one of the first things you'll notice is the uneven sound mixing.
Was his whole life.
My guys from prison got pinups on the walls, and so did Rocco. Only his pinup was of a rack of...
What?
The music and sound effects tend to drown out the narration, and that seems like it would be hard to miss. In truth, the crew caught it right away, but there's more to it, as Steve told me.
It's wonky, and we knew it, but what happened is we kept saying to the audio house, Master's Workshop, that what we're getting on TV is not what we heard and approved in the studio. No, it's all the same. No, we can hear the difference. This went on for the whole year, and in season 2, we took it to a different house. And then years later, we were told that yes, there was a mistake, there was a problem in the room, and what we were approving was not what people heard at home.
So, yeah, that sucks. If you have access to subtitles, you might want to turn them on, though I still managed to get through okay without them. Season 1's also unique in that it had themed episodes. One might be about food, another about animals or fashion, and the puppet skits reflected that too, so there's a nice synergy going on. Alongside the diner, there was also the unseen waitress Rosie, voiced by Jane Eastwood, a name I've mentioned before, and during my interview with the creators of Bob and Margaret who worked with her, it's a name we all forgot. All that makes season 1 really special. The other two are great, of course, but this one's a bit more unique. The puppet bits also got a lot shorter in season 2. They used to be 1 to 2 minutes long, but sometimes they're on screen for only 10 seconds before going to the next story. The closing bits are longer, but unrelated to the earlier segments. They're usually reading fan mail, which, as I've come to learn, the team hated. Freaky aired on Fox Family in the States, though I can't find any footage of this, and US broadcasters show more commercials per half hour than Canada or Europe. They needed a segment that could be taken out without ruining the show's flow, and came up with Larry's Mailbag. The same thing happened on Magic School Bus, actually. The Ask the Producer segments where kids called in with questions, those were scrubbed out on Cubo, TLC, and Fox Kids. Fox Family dropped Freaky by season 3, so Freaky dropped the mailbag. As Steve put it, it took away from the stories, added no value, and ate up ideas. That said, they're still fun to watch, but ironically, the puppet skits never aired in the States. Decode never really got Freaky. It was a hard sell for them, and they sent it out however they could. Most places just aired random stories as interstitial filler, devoid of context. They also hated the puppets because they bled cash. One day of shooting cost $50,000. At one point, they had a guy from Mainframe come in to propose doing their bits in CG animation. Mainframe's best known for Reboot, but Decode helped co-produce their show Weirdos, if anyone remembers that. Steve, however, was ready for them.
I was ready. I knew they were coming in for this, so I had my VHS tape queued up. I said, okay, I'll make you a deal. If you can do this, then we'll do it. He said, okay, what is it? I put the tape in. This guy slides up to the camera. Before we did every tape with Maurice, we'd grease him up with the slime, and we'd put a big gob of slime in his mouth, right? He comes up to the camera and goes, Larry, teach me how to be charming. And when he says charming, this big glob of snot comes out of his mouth. Everyone cracked up. I said, can you do that? They said, no, we can't do that. I said, then we stick with the puppets. Thank you, goodbye, and I left the room.
Season 1's stories were 4 minutes long, but after this, they get an extra 45 seconds, and with 4 an episode, that's 3 more minutes of story time. I can maybe count on one hand the stories I didn't like, but with how short they are, a good story was always around the corner. There's 140 in total, landing Steve the record of producing more animated shorts than anyone else in Canada. I'd believe that. I mean, you gonna doubt a man recognized by Guinness for the world's largest googly eyes? I'm not. I even learned of a few urban legends myself watching this. There's the stuff everyone knows, like the Hookman or Sewer Gator, with some fun twists, but there's others I've never heard before. The one where the poodle bites off a burglar's finger comes from the choking Doberman, though with most urban legends, the details vary. And it's here I learned about the babysitter and the man upstairs legend. I've tossed around the phrase, the call is coming from inside the house, for years, but I thought it was from a horror flick. These kind of stories made me look up the original tales and where they first stemmed from, and that was its own fun. Then I came across something really twisted. Episode 15 has what I think is the creepiest story of them all, Safe at Home, and reading the original story, I could never imagine something that messed up. I say this because I care. If you can help it, do not look it up yourself. Let's just say the creator of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure took a liking to it for part 4, and if you know his stance on dogs, yeah, enough said. But kudos to Freaky for not straying away from some truly graphic stuff. They made them accessible for a broader audience, yet still retain the creep factor. That's not easy to do. I did a rewatch with my brother in 2023, and after each story, we'd say things like, yeah, that sounds true, to, oh, no doubt this happened. And sometimes, man, I really hope this didn't happen to someone, like in the case with the story with the dog Mozart. But that one gets bonus points for incorporating Mozart music. The ones with aliens and robots are obviously more out there, but it's all part of the fun. Those ones make you wiggle your fingers and go, ooh, scary. But a lot of stories aren't scary at all. I'd even stress to call some of them freaky. The show's original name was Urban Legends, but YTV suggested the Freaky name, and that ended up giving them total freedom with the subject matter. Which was good because Steve admits they ran out of the Urban Legends stuff pretty fast. Stories could be scary, surreal, gross, a straight up musical, it's all fair game. But what's really freaky is a lot of them are based on true stories, a few being taken from Steve's own life. The one where the circus elephant gets the cabbie out of the ditch? That happened to his father, right down to the cab's license number. His folks weren't thrilled seeing it at first because it reminded them of their money situation at the time. The elephant crushed the back of the car and the insurance guys didn't believe the story themselves. That incident nearly sunk them, but his dad ended up liking the retelling in the end. Or the one with the grape juice loving kid who goes on a field trip to see where it's made and that other kid hawks a loogie in the vat? Happened to Steve, who hasn't drunk Welch's anything since. Or the one where the couple accidentally brings the fecal sample with them to the theater? Happened to his aunt and uncle. Steve of course got permission to tell these stories, and when they aired on TV, he'd get stern but approving critiques over the phone. The way most of these are written, they feel like they could come from a really good book, and at the same time, something a friend could relay to you casually. No joke, this show is home to some of the best storytelling I've heard in almost anything. Each story has a different narrator as well. Some might be a little out there, but remember, they're being told by people from all walks of life. A prison warden, schoolgirl, wacky old man, flamboyant hairdresser, etc. And the voice cast is a who's who from the Toronto area. A lot of them from Stratford actually, those classically trained folk. Steve was there for pretty much every recording session too. If I listed them all, we'd be here all day, but I do want to spotlight a few. Richard Yearwood shows up a couple times, so if you ever wanted to hear Donkey Kong talk about Area 51 or a kid-friendly sex, drugs, and rock and roll, look no further. A couple were done by Chris Wiggins, who was Cornelius in Babar, and I love Babar, so that tickled me pink hearing him again. I have expected him to say, "Yeah, my tusks, Babar." There's also Jonathan Wilson, and with his voice, all I think of is that PSA with the talking TV.
It's times like this that one tells God he will never participate in a panty raid.
Yeah, you hear that voice, you go, hey, what you watching? Me, I'm just the TV. I mean, I'm not even human. Okay, I'm just gonna stop. The legendary Don Franks is here too. Actor and rock star extraordinaire, and the father of fellow VO legend Cree Summer. They both worked on Inspector Gadget, one of Steve's first cartoon gigs, and Frank sometimes filled in as Dr. Claw for Frank Welker. Made me very happy to hear that voice in one of his stories.
Bring me the next Judah.
We also got Ben King K. Rule Campbell, who, if his name wasn't in the credits, I never would have known. He does one story as two characters, one with an American accent, an Australian accent. Let me talk about this one real quick. I mentioned Kangaroo Jack earlier, but this story predates it by 5 years to an almost scary degree. There's an unconscious kangaroo, these guys dress it up and take photos, then it wakes up and hops away with their stuff. I thought, no, there is no way. And no, this wasn't used as filler when I saw Kangaroo Jack, but just imagine. I recognized a couple of the writers here too. BC-based Ian James Corlett hangs with the Toronto boys yet again, but there's also James Backshall. Who is he? Well, he was one of my college professors, and he was overall a really cool guy. Don't know why it took me this long to talk about the show's art, but I like it too. You get quite a mix of styles with the stories. Some stuff is more realistic, other styles are reminiscent of UPA or Hanna-Barbera, and that could range from like the 60s to early Cartoon Network Hanna-Barbera. I really like the ones where the shadows are all moody and sketchy looking. You see one of these ones, you know you're in for something spooky. A few recycled designs crop up here and there, but I'll cut them some slack. It only distracted me with the beehive hair lady because she was the focus of 3 stories. On that note, some named characters show up in more stories, which is pretty cool. There's Murray the Moocher and this kid Jerry who get 2, but the clear favorite is the futuristic traveling salesman Joe who got 3. But that's fine, cause his stories have some of the best theming. They're done in a letterbox style with a wonderful film noir vibe. Dark rainy nights, robots everywhere. Reminds me a lot of Samurai Jack, specifically the X-49 episode, one of the best. Joe's tales come highly recommended, and if you want to know some of my other favorites, here they are right now. I really had to think about it after Steve asked me which ones I liked best. That led to him sending me something, nothing crazy, just complete storyboards of some that I mentioned, and he even threw in a script for an unaired show that he pitched. Nothing less than an honor. I got storyboards for Carpet Man, Accidental Cannibals, and The Lodger, the very last freaky story. This one also came with some line art, and the boards even have Korean notes for that crew. This text box even has a fancy font. It's amazing! It's dated to May 24th, 2000, so all the wikis that say this aired in '99, you're probably wrong. Season 3 is only 9 episodes instead of 13. After getting dropped by Fox Family, Decode pulled the plug on funding, but Steve said YTV begged for more episodes. That's just how things go sometimes, but at least they went out on a high note. Maurice and Larry's segments have more time to breathe and tell a story again, for one, and they blew their props budget on this little baby, the Maggot Mobile. You'll love to see it. Anyway, Steve always wanted the last story to be Christmas themed, and the episode before this, he told the Fun Bag guys, take it easy, do the minimum amount of work, cause for this finale, I need you at your very best. As an aside, Steve also wrote every story for the final episode. To him, The Lodger's the ultimate freaky story, and I get where he's coming from. It's got an amazing atmosphere with an art style unlike any other story. I'm such a sucker for backgrounds and objects with no straight edges. Our narrator's Maurice Dean Wint, one of a select few to voice Spawn, by the way, and his voice is equal parts bone-chilling and warm and inviting, perfect for a twisted Christmas poem. The original story is about a shady lodger who turns out to be Jack the Ripper, and this is no different, except he's just called Jackie here. As the townsfolk get more suspicious of him, tension builds and builds. They go into his room and find a list of names written in blood red. First time I saw this, I was heading to bed and it legit freaked me out. But then, things lighten up, and we see that the lodger was just Saint Nick this whole time. And it would have ended there before inspiration struck Steve. Here's what happened.
What happened is I wrote the whole thing, and then this is a true story, and I wrote the end. And then, like the night before we recorded it, I had this inspiration for that whole thing where Santa's locked in the thing. I just wrote it, just bang, because I'd been writing The Lodger for weeks because it's poetry. And then that last part where Santa's in the sleigh, Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night, ha ha ha. That was like 10 minutes of inspiration. And I stuffed it into the fax machine to YTV, and I said, approve this. Don't question it, just approve it. We got the approval. We went into the recording studio. The script was longer than usual. We actually had a metronome going so that the actor, Maurice Dean Wint, he's like hitting the metronome, everything. And it came out, it was like wonderful like that.
That inspiration took a good story and elevated it to, I'm gonna say it, a perfect one. When the twist happened, I literally, genuinely applauded. It's the best send-off for this freaky little show. As for where you can watch it, for a long time the answer was, I don't know. It was super hard to find in its entirety until it got dumped online in 2020. As of this upload, seasons 1 and 2 are on Tubi, which, when it comes to my videos, the question is usually, to be or not to be? They're also on iTunes, and season 3 is on Amazon and Google Play, but only in the States, which you can't buy without a US address. Like, what kind of crap is that? Americans barely got the show in the first place. Season Season 3 is out there, you just gotta look in the right places and make sure they're a full 22 minutes. The TV airings also had "We'll Be Right Back" bumpers the digital versions removed, though if you listen closely, you might hear a snippet from them from time to time. Some of it led back into the show, resulting in awkward cuts of a track already 5 seconds in. This is why I don't get the recommended 8 hours of sleep. Freaky also had a website on MSN Canada, one of the first shows featured on the service. All that's left of that are screenshots. I wouldn't recommend looking up a URL that looks like this. At the time the show was cancelled, Steve said they could have easily kept going, and still had concepts they never got around to. He's also been asked about the idea of a reboot over the years, but his answer's always been the same.
Would I want to do it again? No. I think 2 or 3 times a year, somebody will say, "Hey, Steve, I got this idea. Why don't we do a revamp of Freaky Stories?" Wow. I mean, it's like, that's your brilliant idea, is you want to rip off my 25-year-old project. That's the best you got. I don't want that to be the high point of my life. It was great, but I look forward to my next adventures, which are going to be equally as great and less frustrating. For me, Simon is no longer with us. Ted is no longer with us. Barney, the cameraman, isn't with us. I'm in touch with a lot of people. We have a good time when we get together. But no, it was from its time period. To go back, it wouldn't be the same.
Steve's only regret is never giving Maurice a set of dentures. It would have cost nothing, and he thought of it right after they finished their last day of shooting. Dang. Some Freaky alumni like James Rankin, Dan Redican, and Gord Robertson went to work on Puppets Who Kill, which I've heard good things about, so I'll have to check that out sometime. Though this show never got crazy big, it still leaves behind its own little legacy. Video essays, a documentary that came out in 2019, online thread sharing memories. Steve never wanted to skimp out on a story because he knew decades down the line, someone would come to him and say how a particular story shaped their childhood, even if this person wasn't born yet. He put it on himself to make sure their favorite story, whatever it was as great as it could be given the time and budget. I think I can say that paid off. I mean, I'm living proof of that. If you want to hear even more from Steve, I've got a full interview coming soon as I record this. We go even deeper into Freaky Stories and a bunch of other stuff he's done, like being head writer on Atomic Betty, how traveling salesman Joe inspired a movie pitch, and even how he voiced Inspector Gadget once. Trust me, you're gonna love this. I'll leave a link in the description and a video card when it's done. Anywho, I hope you give Freaky Stories a shot, whether it was a childhood favorite, you haven't seen it in a bit, or it's completely new to you. Wherever you fall, I'm confident in saying you really haven't seen anything like it before.
Hey, not bad tonight, huh?
Yeah, well, good enough for our stupid viewers.
Yeah, anybody that watches us got to be a real moron.
Guys, we're still in the air.
No.
Thanks so much for watching, everybody. I really hope you enjoyed what you saw. If you did, feel free to give this video a like, subscribe, check out my social media pages, my Patreon page where you can see videos like this before anybody else, all that good stuff I always go on about. And of course, a big thanks to Steve for all his help. This video wouldn't be half of what it is without him. And thanks for making Freaky Stories too, that's also pretty sweet. I'd also like to give a shout out to Lars Niswant and Mystica Bell over on Patreon for their support. It means more than you know, guys. Thanks so much. And if you've seen Freaky Stories, tell me what that show means to you. What were your favorite aspects of the show, or what were some of your favorite stories? Be sure to leave your thoughts down in the comments below, and I'm sure Steve will be looking at them too. And while you're here, feel free to check out some of the videos I've got on screen. I really enjoyed making them. Hopefully you'll enjoy watching them. And with all that said, I'll see you guys next time. Later!